and welcome to Press TV's news analysis coming to you out of Tehran. I'm Marzi Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, we have a special look at the P5+1 meeting that has taken place in Istanbul, with so far both parties saying that there have been very positive results and now scheduled to go for another round of talks in Baghdad in May. Well, stay with us right here on this news analysis as we take a closer look at the possible results of these P5+1 meetings and what it could mean in the long run. And I'd like to welcome my guests right here in the studio with me. Very happy to have Dr. Mohammad Marandi from Tehran University. Thank you so much for being with us. Well, it's been quite interesting today. We've seen back and forth a couple of different meetings. First starting these meetings, going into it with some skepticism, but overall, as we have heard Catherine Ashton and Dr. Saeed Jalili speak after the meetings, it seemed to have ended on a positive tone. What's your take of it so far?
I agree. I think that over the past couple of days, Western media outlets have been let it be known that Western diplomats are trying to put a positive spin on the upcoming talks, and it seems that after the representatives of the two sides spoke, that so far the talks, we can say probably that with caution that they are positive. The fact that there is no talk so far of Iran halting the enrichment of uranium on behalf of the 5+1 is a very, very significant move, and I think it's a major achievement on the Iranian side. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that over the last year and a half, the Iranians have shown that every time Western powers have tried to punish the country and to prevent Iran progressing in the nuclear field, Iran has overcome. And for example, the fact that they've been able to enrich uranium at 20%, the fact that they've been able to actually turn that into fuel, and the fact that the Iranian elections had such a high turnout during the height of Western sanctions. In other words, Western countries have really gone all the way, as far as they can, to damage Iran, in the hope that perhaps Iranians would lose their morale and the Iranian position would be weakened. But I think, as most Iranian analysts expected, it was the other way around, and it united the country even further. I think we see a recognition of this to a degree on the Western side. And also you have to take into account that the Russians and the Chinese have really parted ways with Western countries.
Yeah, I wanted to look at that, as a matter of fact. I basically looking at, do you think in general the parameters have changed, and part of the reason is because there is no longer that united front, as you've just pointed out, about Moscow and Beijing? How significant is that in this whole formula of things?
I think that's very important. After what happened in Libya, the Russians and the Chinese felt cheated. Mm-hmm. And then in Syria, they decided to take a stand. They felt that the Americans and the Europeans wanted to change the map of the Middle East. And I think this is also reflected in their position now with regards to Western intentions in the Persian Gulf region, and with regards to Iran and the Iranian nuclear program. And it's not only Russia and China. I think you see a distancing of India away from Western policy. In the past couple of years, India had sort of tilted a bit more towards the West, and it seems as if it's tilting away within the framework of the BRICS, which is a very important new, not global structure, but global, let's say, loose alliance of nations. And Brazil as well, Latin America. Brazil has been very critical of Western policy towards Iran. So I think you see a global change taking place, a shift away from Europe and the United States as the center of gravity and center of world politics. And I think it's being reflected in the talks. But of course, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that the Iranian people have been united, and that Western countries have realized that the Iranians are not going to give up their rights to enrichment. And I think something that you commented on before we came on air was very important, and that is that after the Tehran Declaration, if the United States and Western countries had agreed and played a reasonable game, if they had sold Iranian enriched uranium at 20%, and they had gone along with what they had agreed to, Obama had agreed to in his letter to the Brazilian president and the Turkish prime minister, then there would have been no need in the first place for Iran to produce uranium at 20%.
Right. It seems very ironic that at that point in time that it was agreed to in Turkey and the Iranian delegation was ready to go with it, but it was the United States immediately that said no. And now at this point in time, Iran, of course, is enriching 20%. And now I don't think that Iran is going to back down on this, as Dr. Jalili was just saying in his press conference. Interesting enough, I want to look at the press conference because you talked about the media. You said that prior to the meetings taking place that you saw positive spins coming out of the Western media. Let's start from there, because why do you think that that was taking place?
Well, it's difficult to say because we have to see the ultimate outcome of the talks. The fact that there are going to be further talks, especially the fact that they're going to be held in Iraq, again, is another achievement, because the Iranians wanted the second round of talks to be held in Iraq, and Western countries didn't. Right. So this shows that Iran is carrying a great deal of weight and authority in these talks. But I think that it's probably has to do with the fact that Western politicians may be looking for a way out of this problem. They've gone as far as they could with regards to sanctions. They've, to be honest, to be blunt, they've gone and done and carried out some pretty barbaric steps. The fact that they've placed an embargo on the Iranian central bank, theoretically speaking, means that they intend to prevent Iran even from importing rice, because they want to shut down trade completely. Or an embargo on Iranian oil, which where they try to force third parties from purchasing oil from Iran, is intended to wreck the economy. In other words, the intention is to devastate the economy and to severely hurt ordinary people. That's theoretically what they're up to. They've gone as far as they can, and they haven't achieved the results that they want.
So they have seen in the interim, as they have exerted more pressure, though, that the Iranian people seem to be as united as ever, as Dr. Jalili also talked about, once again, the latest parliamentary elections. And that turnout, how significant do you think that type of turnout in the middle of what has been taking place and the Western countries especially exerting pressure on Iran, how significant was that in the whole scheme of things?
I think that was probably one of the key events and one of the most important events over the past couple of years in the country. I think the turnout surprised all of us. It surprised me, definitely. The fact not only that the turnout was very high, was important, very high, it was like roughly 65, almost 65%. Right. On the other hand, you had reformists participating, different trends within the principalist or conservative camps. You had the President Khatami, former President Khatami participating, allies of the current president, Mr. Rafsanjani. You had almost everyone. It brought all the different political forces that work within the framework of the Constitution into the playing field. And it was a major confidence, voice of confidence by the Iranian people with regards to the Islamic Republic. So while the turnout was very high and while it was very good for the Islamic Republic, I think it was very bad news for the Western countries that were carrying out the sanctions, and it weakened their position, because not only does it show Iran's strength, but it also shows that sanctions and inhuman actions that are being carried out by the West only have an adverse effect on Iranian public opinion, and also they have an adverse effect on independent countries. Countries like India do not like being bullied by the West. Countries like China, like Russia, like Brazil, they find it more and more unacceptable the way in which the Europeans and Americans are acting. This is no longer the Eurocentric world where the white Europeans dictate their terms to the rest of us.
What about a lot of these sanctions not only not getting the results that they have wanted, but also backfiring in many ways? We see now oil prices just skyrocketing in the United States, in Europe. Do you think that that also is a factor in this right now, because they're going through very difficult economic times, and with the oil prices going higher and higher on top of it? How important is it now for the Europeans? Many experts that we've talked to had said prior to this that they were basically going by what Tel Aviv expected of them. Is it possible that right now they're looking first at their own country's interests?
Well, I think that up to now it's clear to most of us that what they were doing and what they have been doing is not in the interests of Europe or the United States. The European economies are in crisis. Over the past few days, it's become clear that they're not out of the woods. Things are getting much worse. Many people believe that the worst is yet to come. The U.S. economy is suffering very badly, and it seems that over the next few years, it will continue to deteriorate. And the more tensions with the Islamic Republic of Iran, as you pointed out, the higher the price of oil. But in addition to that, this also helps tilt the balance of power further away from the United States and the Europeans, because the countries that actually benefit from these sanctions are the rivals of the Europeans and the United States. It's the Chinese who get extra trade with Iran. It's the Indians who get extra trade with Iran. The Brazilians and all those countries who do not recognize the sanctions, they gain a great deal from this. So the Europeans are really shooting themselves in the feet on different fronts. And I think that obviously Israel wants to keep confrontation as high as possible. But the Europeans and the Americans can only go so far. And I think there's also one final issue, at least that I can think of right now, and that is the changes taking place in the Middle East. Countries like Saudi Arabia and other oil-producing countries are highly unstable. Yemen is falling apart, the old Yemen at least. Iraq is a new country and has poor relations with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has problems at home. It has problems with the people of Bahrain that they've occupied. And the millions of people who work in Saudi Arabia from abroad, the Egyptians are very angry with the regime, the millions of Yemenis in the country.